So Dr. Patel, I hear you do research with medical devices in pancreatology.
I do, Peter. So, Chris and I, to give you a little background, are biomedical engineers.
Uh-huh.
That's sort of my bachelor's background.
Oh, okay.
So I sort of went into advanced endoscopy with that sort of interest in mind, and
Hmm.
did my advanced year in 2005, so almost 13 years ago, and from Milwaukee, took the job at the University of Texas, and at that time there was no advanced endoscopy program. So I had a chance to sort of build a program from the ground up, so to speak.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so as a part of that, then as you'll find out next year, depending on where you're going, part of that, the nidus was to bring in new technologies to sort of build your program.
Hmm.
But you'll be surprised, as having the advanced background, depending on how much you are interested in your equipment,
Hmm.
there's certainly a lot of opportunities that are organic
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
process, and that sort of just is, has just created a domino effect. I can't say that I really had a business plan
Mm-hmm.
getting into this type of thing from the beginning,
Hmm.
but and I can share that. I can just share with you guys my experience of sort of, we are now at a point between Chris and I where we have a biomedical engineering team
Wow.
with PhD students and BME faculty. So we have we have that team of folks that we work with for biotechnology innovation. We have our links to industry, and then we always have our clinical investigator driven
Mm-hmm.
research. So as that, that makes up our clinical research program, or makes up a research program. So, depending on what you guys are interested in, we can talk about anything under the sun that sort of relates to, starting a advanced endoscopy program, or depending on where you're going in, how to create a niche for yourself. If you have this interest of technology and technology-driven research, how do you sort of get into that?
Mm-hmm.
And it differs, it differs from where you're going. Is there a mentor there that's available for you? Are you starting this from scratch?
Right.
You know, but so that's kind of my background.
Hmm.
And over the years, we've developed that niche, whether it's from an industry interest standpoint, where industry comes to us, or whether it's initiated by us, then we take to industry. It's taken years, obviously, to build those relationships and channels of communication, but it's an incredibly interesting process in terms of how do you sort of go from idea, um, concept, to prototype, to commercialization, to
Mm-hmm.
clinical research and animal research. The whole process of doing this. So there's a multitude of ways to spin it, or you can look at it from, how do I just get in?
Hmm.
How do I get on already going trials? How do I get into that Spyglass DS trial that is a multi-center trial? How does my center get into something like that? So
Hmm.
um, Peter, where are you headed after you graduate?
So I'll be going to Philadelphia. I'll be joining Penn with
Ah,
their advanced endoscopy department.
yeah, with
So
Greg, and yeah,
yeah, yeah. Met with them a few times. So
yeah, congrats.
um,
Is that where you're from originally?
no, my wife, my my parents-in-law, they live in New Jersey, and
Yeah,
my wife's been wanting to head out to near want to live nearby them. So
yeah,
we've been just specifically looking in Philly, and uh, very lucky that a position opened up, and
yeah.
I
Congrats.
got the job.
That's a
So
great opportunity.
yeah, yeah.
And these guys there. So.
Yeah, so there's a couple more that will be joining us in a few minutes, but we should probably get started. Kevin just joined us. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself to Dr. Patel?
Yeah, certainly. So my name's Kevin Harris. I'm one of the first-year residents, one of the interns at Cleveland Clinic, and I had the good fortune of meeting Peter early on in my training, who set me up with the CAPER group. So
Oh, great.
Here tonight.
Well, congrats. Well, that's great, Kevin. Kudos for you for getting in on things really early in the process. Yeah, that's great.
Kevin's working on so Cleveland Clinic has a special program for the residency residents where they pick several residents that with academic support to work on a project, and he's currently working on diabetes after acute pancreatitis, just looking at some clinical predictors and risk factors. That's something that he's been working on.
Okay.
So,
fantastic.
Yeah, it's a very exciting program, and I'm looking forward to that more when we have a dedicated block. But good project and good support. So very excited.
Great.
I think Amir just joined us. Amir, so we're online with Dr. Patel. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Just wait.
Amir, are you there? Maybe you can't hear me. Let me. Okay, I think Adrian just joined us too, although her mic has been turned off. So, Chris, why don't we just go ahead and if you could just lead the introduction and the discussion from now on.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Peter. So you guys who are here probably know this is a CAPER Trainee Committee meeting. Peter Lee's our chair.
Hello, guys. This is Amir. Sorry
Hey,
for
Amir.
bothering. Hey, how are you?
He finally got his mic working.
Welcome,
So,
Amir.
Thanks.
Yeah, introduce yourself, Amir.
Hey, my name is Amir. I'm second-year internal medicine resident at Pittsburgh. I knew Peter from since I think 3 years ago, mostly from CAPER and pancreas. I'm doing research in acute pancreatitis with Pittsburgh people, and that's it.
Fantastic. Welcome, Amir.
Thank you.
And Adrian joined. Adrian, a familiar face.
Hey, we know. Welcome, Adrian. Hey, how are you?
Hi, Dr. Patel.
You look like you're still at work. That's not good.
I am, but I don't want to miss it. So
Okay, all right. Oh my goodness, you gotta get home. All right.
All right. So Dr. Patel, for those of you guys who don't know, is actually our medical director at UT Health in San Antonio. He was the founding medical director of the Advanced Endoscopy program, also the founding director of the fellowship program in Advanced Endoscopy. Has practiced for about 13 years now on his own. Did his fellowship in Minneapolis and KC, and then also had some training in his early days in Texas Tech in Lubbock and in biomedical engineering through Boston University. So he's been around quite a bit, and I think he spent some time in California as well, although that might have been personal. So he's traveled the country, so he's seen a lot of things and had the opportunity to do a lot of work. And he's going to talk to us today about medical devices and how they relate to pancreas disease state research. So we had a couple of questions from some email questionnaires that we sent out to the group, just basically asking folks to say, hey, what types of questions do you have for Dr. Patel? And I think some of those came from Peter. And so I also wanted to ask if anybody else had any questions before we get started with those questions. So y'all go ahead and take it away.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, don't worry, guys. I don't bite, and I've got my nice glass of wine here, so I'm nice and relaxed. And this is, it's really, you know, there's really no silly question. You guys are really early in your careers, and you know, it's funny. I've sort of, you know, been doing this for 13 years out of fellowship, and you look back and you're like, wow, you know, where did that time just go? I still feel like it wasn't that long ago when I was sitting in your chairs, and it's just an incredible time for you, you know, very exciting time. The world's your oyster, and it's really a matter of sort of, you know, trying it all and getting an idea of what sort of settles with you, and what your niche is and what makes you happy, and trying to create a situation in which, like me, I'm really kind of consider myself to be the luckiest person in the world. I kind of wake up in the morning and I jump out of bed and I love what I do. And partly it's because of what I've been able to create, you know, creating in terms of creating an environment that allows me to do exactly what I like to do most of the time. And so that's the stuff that you guys have got to figure out. You know, you're getting your training, you've gotten your opportunity, you've got your whole career ahead of you. And, you know, whether it's academic practice, private practice, hybrid practice, you know, what does that look like for you, and what interests you, and where are there opportunities, right? So it all has to sort of mesh together for that to launch in the direction that that leads to success. And success is sort of a personal thing. So, you know, since the topic, I don't know, Chris, you wanna go?
Yeah, sure.
Specific
So,
questions, or do you want me to?
sure thing. Yeah, no, that sounds great. So one of the questions that was emailed was, and so I'll sort of start from the beginning, and I think the first stage in this, you might agree, would be the stage in intellectual property. So the question was around, could you tell us about the steps you take to protect intellectual property when you come up with an innovative device idea?
Right. So number one is keep it to yourself. You know, I think I've lost maybe 20 projects over the years because I'm just a friendly person and I like to talk. And before you know it, that will have a Wilson Cook wrapper around it or a Boston Scientific wrapper around it. And, you know, you'd always like to think that, hey, this was my idea. And in reality, it might have been somebody else's that was sharing the same idea, but you never know that, right? You never know that. So obviously, confidentiality and non-disclosure statements are huge. I think just being aware that, you know, if you have a great idea, you should really keep it to yourself and you should protect it in regards to whom you're speaking to. And it can be a colleague, it can be a fellow mate, it can be, you know, it could be something that you've drawn up on a napkin. I mean, there's so many success stories that were initially, and Chris and I have a few of these that we've drawn out over lunch on a piece of napkin. You just never know who is looking, or who has access to this, and who will take it to the next step, which is really the tricky part, right? I mean, you guys are in a position, you know, where you will know a lot about pancreas, and you will be in a situation, especially Peter, from what I know, you know, you'll be in an environment where you're practicing pancreatology. And so all of a sudden you are a very, very special commodity, because, you know, if you're paying attention and if you have an interest on this, you will find needs, because it's just part of your daily life in practicing pancreatology. Once you become familiar with what tools are available, and you know disease states, and now the techniques are comfortable to you, you will realize very quickly where there are needs and where there are voids, and you'll start thinking about how could this be better? We don't have anything for this situation. And so your mind starts to think about these things, and you start, you know, the big part to this, the thing that took Chris and I probably a while to figure out, is how do you go from sort of idea, concept, to practicality and something concrete that, you know, that's tangible in your hands. And that's a lengthy process. But I think first and foremost is to sort of protect your ideas. People will always be hovering around you, and they probably already are, in terms of reps and people who really want to get to know you, and they want to share things with you. And obviously you'll have this feeling or nidus to want to share with them. They'll be asking you questions about things. And I'm not saying don't be friendly or don't share, but if there's something that's really, special and, when in doubt, keep it sort of to yourself or protect it. And so, Chris, what would you say? I mean, almost any time we have a conversation with folks about either their intellectual property or our intellectual property, what do we usually sign?
Yeah, I mean, non-disclosure agreement, confidentiality agreements are really important.
So those are really simple things, and actually, it's not a bad thing to keep on your computer. Just a generic non-disclosure agreement. You can just print it out right in front of you, and then have people sign it, and all of a sudden, I do these at DDW all the time. Every meeting that I'm at, it's usually very, it's the industry certainly thinks of it. You better believe they're going to protect what they're working on. They want to get your idea on something. They're going to make you sign an NDA. You should do the same thing. If you're discussing something with them, they won't necessarily always guide you to do that. So if there's nothing else that you take from our conversation, if you take that away from this meeting, I think that's a success in itself. Hopefully I've spared you some major grief. Okay. That was a great question.
All right, so another question that was emailed in was about research in the early stages. So the question is, what is your approach to obtaining funding for medical device research in an animal model?
Yeah, Chris and I still struggle with that today. That's a toughie. We like to spend time in the animal lab, and obviously we write IACUC grants to do animal research, and these projects, depending on how many pigs, it's usually about $2,000 per pig by the time you start to finish, necropsy and everything. So if you're doing an average 6 to 10 pig study, that starts to add up a little bit, and you're usually looking for $10,000 to $15,000, $20,000 grants. And honestly, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to get these things. I think early on, I think my advice to all of you would be to seek out young investigator grants. The ACG puts them out, the ASGE puts them out, the AGA puts them out, and I can't remember if it's the first 3 years or 5 years of your academic career where you have access to these things, but they are gold. They are gold because, I think year one, I got two grants, and I really milked them for about the first 7 years of my academic career. And if, just because the hardest thing is to get your ideas off the ground. You've got a great grant, you've got a great idea. You need that first $15,000, $20,000 to get your preliminary data out, and it can really be the bottleneck roadblock for you. So if you can find young investigators, whether it's through CAPER or Pancreas Fest or the APA or the ACG, there are quite a few out there. And the other place, honestly, are institutional grants. So the facility, if you're at Pitt or if you're at Cleveland, or there are community grants also. So there are institutional grants and community grants that you can apply for. They're National Pancreas Foundation grants. Chris, Chris has written a lot of grants over the last couple of years for this kind of startup money, before we get to the big money and big grants, because obviously people are going to want to see some prelim ad hoc feasibility data on whatever your project is before they're going to fund you, unless you're slipping in under a mentor that already has funds or will be a co-PI with you. So probably not telling you anything you don't already know, but.
Now, do you ever consider obtaining funding from like a device company, or is that just too risky?
No, and I almost said that, Peter, to tell you the truth. I mean, we do, we haven't, actually, I take that back. We took a no-scar grant year 2, which, I mean, the check came from Olympus, but it was a no-scar grant, which is, Coachman's baby, where you're headed. And I was okay with that because it was still a peer group. You can get monies from industry in a couple of different ways, but now with the Sunshine Act, it's gotten a little bit, I guess it just all depends on your philosophy on, all of this is public information. So if you take a $25,000 grant, whether it's labeled as an educational grant or not, it will show up on the national website under your name. It just really depends on how you feel about that.
I see.
There are little ways to get around that though, Peter. I mean, you can get Olympus or Boston or whomever you decide to work with to give the institution the money. And so the institution is listed, as the receiving, if you have special accounts, MSRDP accounts that then, sometimes when those monies come in, they can, they don't necessarily come in under your control. So that's again something that Greg and Mike can kind of help you with at Penn, because they've done a fair amount of work, I think, with Boston Scientific and other people. As those grants come in, how can those grants be protected in a way that you get to utilize them for project X, Y, and Z? So, it's those monies have become a little difficult, honestly, to come by because they're also worried about the same thing. The things that they used to fund 10, 15 years ago, whether it was fellowships or projects or trips, because of the Sunshine Act, have become a little stickier, Peter. So, I mean, my advice would be try not to take that if you don't have to. I mean, there are plenty of other arenas in which you can get that. If that's sort of your last resort and that's what you need to get the project started, then, you've got to do what you've got to do. But I mean, that does lead to an interesting topic, and that is, as a young investigator, clinician, what is that line between you and industry? And how do you manage that relationship in sort of in a perceived honorable manner, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be the sort of known amongst your peers as, oh, he's the Boston Scientific guy, or he's the Wilson Cook guy. I mean, he's sort of a hired gun for these companies. But there are some people that have managed that beautifully, where they are their own people, but they have an incredible amount of industry support or relationship with industry, because industry can help you quite a bit. And Mike will tell you best. I think Mike's done that pretty well over the years at Penn, and Greg has done that to some degree as well, because it's difficult, right off the bat to create, if this is what I mean, obviously the reason we're sitting here tonight is, how can I make a big splash, right? I want to get in, I want to start my job. I'm at Penn or Cleveland or Pitt, and how can I make my splash amongst people, and industry to some degree can help you with that. Your relationship with them, whether it's from a clinical aspect of marketing your services to referring doctors and channeling those patients directly to you, or whether that is contacts and connectors to introduce you to work groups, to get you into multi-center trials that other people are doing that are sort of device driven. I think, those are all things a lot of us do, and do quite a bit. You just walk a fine line, and you just have to, you just have to be cognizant, I think, more than anything, that it's sort of the wrong way. So, honestly, the more money you take from industry, that sort of puts you in that category, right? Of boy, and everybody always wants something in return. So it's they want, they're going to fund you $25,000. They probably want you to use their devices on whatever you're doing, So is honestly, there's no free ticket here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's not completely voodoo. Like, when I was coming out 10 years ago, people were just like, do not do this, do not do that. Don't be perceived as that person. I mean, there are Rob Hawes of the world and Todd Barons of the world and Mansours of the world, that, have done work with industry and yet have kept a very good name for themselves academically.
Mm. Okay, that helps. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, so one other question that came up was, what is the most exciting medical device you're working on that you can share with us?
Wow. Yeah. So I guess based on what I'm saying, I'm gonna have to print out like 5 NDAs right now, and
It's gonna have to be 8. It's gonna have to be 8. There are 8 people online right now.
Oh wow, 8 NDAs. I'm gonna get all of your names. I got them in front of me. I've got KB, Daniel, Adrian. Oh boy, I'm gonna butcher Kemal Azliki.
Cemal, yeah, Cemal.
Nice. How do you say your name?
Cemal.
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 Okay, very nice. Cemal, where are you from? Where are you calling?
I'm calling from Chicago, Dr. Sandeep. I'm at University of Illinois at Chicago, UIC.
Oh, fantastic. UIC. Great. Well, nice to make your acquaintance. Great. Thanks for coming on board.
Of course. Thanks for joining our meeting.
You're very welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, no, Chris and I, we're working on quite a few different things, at various levels of just concept idea to manufacturing. I mean, you guys are coming into this field at an incredibly exciting time, honestly. Technology in our field is exploding at a rate that one can't even keep up with, honestly. I mean, when I graduated 13 years ago, it was pretty straightforward, man. It was EUS, the RCP, and we were doing the same thing for 30 years, I mean, honestly. And in the last 10 years, all these modalities, whether it's imaging modalities or therapeutic modalities or proteomic modalities or genetic modalities, I mean, it's just exploding at a rate that for a guy like me, even, it's really difficult to keep up. So there's opportunities around you left and right. And it's not really only by the big players in industry anymore. It used to be the 4 big companies in GI, but it's actually all these startups around the world, so the opportunities have become global. A lot of us that are clinicians have started our own companies based on ideas and concepts and one devices. I'll give you a story like Bob Swantz, who took RFA and created Barex, out of his garage. And I think you guys are all familiar with what Barex is right now. It's RFA. And so you listen to a guy like Bob tell his story, and it's incredibly exciting that in a 10-year period, you can go from an idea to a prototype to commercialization to a company and sell that company to something like Medtronics. Not in a lifetime, but in a decade. Or you take Chris Thompson, who said, there's got to be a better EUS platform. And this is just one of his many projects he's working on. And he created the Beacon device, which is slightly different. It's like a Me Too EUS device with a twist. And that project took him about 7 years, and sold it, I think to Medtronic again. So he sold that to Medtronic. So for people who are interested in medical device technology and have sort of that innovative mindset, it's a really exciting time to say, I can do anything. I mean, I can do this. It's certainly within my wheelhouse to be able to do something like that. So I kind of went around your real question, and that is, what are we working on? So, we're working on things that are EUS related, single-use devices that make our current techniques much simpler. So it's sort of taking a technique that I've done maybe thousands of times and come up with a device that will allow me to do that job easier. So that's what I was talking about earlier, Peter. You know, I mean, you know, in a year you'll be doing case after case after case, and sort of that led to one of my first projects. And I'm the PI. I designed the laser probes that people use through spyglass for laser lithotripsy, and it was purely out of need. You know, I was put in a location, and this was not premeditated, right? So a lot of this will depend on where you end up, what your environment is, what you're doing on a regular basis. And, you know, you really kind of look at this as an opportunist and say, what do I need in my practice?
So my burning question right now is that for those of us who don't know what endoscopic necrosectomy is, it's basically you puncture a hole into a necrotic cavity and try to scrape up as much of the dead tissue as possible.
Yeah.
But the problem that I perceive as a trainee is that you spend 3 hours taking out, like, I don't know, 5 centimeter worth of necrosis out of a 30, and then you can bill it for, just realistically speaking, you can bill it as an EGD. There's no other billing code. And so your administrator is telling you, hey, you can't be doing EGDs for 3 hours. So my burning question is, are you working on do you guys ever think about how to do that better?
No, actually, Boston Scientific has already beat us to the punch, Peter. So we I was working with them. You're actually going to see that device at DDW this year.
Nice.
So if you go to DDW, they've got a dissection tool specifically made for necrosectomy. And so it sort of gets back to your point. You know, once you show an interest in this kind of thing, and, you know, people identify you as somebody who's interested and knows their stuff, people start coming to you. And so that's what happens, you know, with a lot of us, me, you know, just an example of that. And so somebody, you know, Boston will say, hey, we're working on this project and we want to vent it out to you, or we want to get an idea whether, before we commit to this, what your thoughts on it. And then the project takes off from there. And then, you know, you're a consultant on that particular project and you sort of see it to fruition. So that stuff's pretty easy to do, Peter, early on. And you start to understand the process a little bit. And more importantly, you start to go through these exercises of understanding the pathways that are necessary to get from idea, the regulatory pathways, and start getting your mind thinking about things. But what you just mentioned is beautiful, right? Something that you see a problem, there's certainly an opportunity for improvement. And, you know, the first thing Chris and I will do is go out and see if there's a patent on whatever we're thinking about. If anybody, you know, this is all public information. So before you waste a ton of time, you know, you do your background work. And if there's nothing out there, then we start working on some drawings, you know, and then we file that. And then we learn how to go through the patent process. And we get the institution to fund it. You know, and that was all, you know, and to get the lawyers involved to do the background research or the patent research. So you kind of learn it as you go, unless you're lucky enough. And Chris, we just finished our innovation technology course, which after 12 years of being here institutionally, they finally started a program for, you know, physician scientists that were interested in device technology and sort of walked us through the process of how to do this. So I'm sure it's, you know, available. I mean, it's available online if you don't have it at your institution. But if you happen to have it at the institution, man, I highly recommend signing up for that early if you're interested in this kind of thing. It'll save you a lot of grief.
Being a millennial, we want quick rewards and immediate gratification. You think a new device will cut it from 3 hours to like an hour? Like, you know, how efficient do you think it's going to be?
Well, number one, Peter, your institution should be billing surgical codes for necrosectomy. Number one.
Really?
Yes. So you should not be billing an EGD, number one.
Does insurance cover that?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. I should tell all my attendings because I guess they don't know about this.
Well, you know, Ohio might be different from Texas, but, you know, there is a surgical necrosectomy code that my colleague has been using. And again, we just found this out about 6 months ago.
Oh, wow.
there are codes that you can use, you know, endoscopy over 2 hours, you know, there are modifiers, but we use surgical codes for necrosectomy.
Okay.
And it pays considerably more than an EGD. But I still like your idea. We need better tools, right? We need better tools.
Well, I'm counting on you, Dr. Patel, and Chris to come up with an instrument so that I can be the first one to try it out.
All right. Well, you, it's not, I'll be honest with you, it's not something we're currently working on, but we will see it. And we're working on a lot of neat things from, you know, lasers to celiac blocks to, you know, just different things to work on different aspects of what you do on a daily basis. And it's really a lot of fun.
So I would hate for this conversation to turn into questions that I have. We have medical students and interns and residents here and fellows. So we should probably, I'm gonna shut up for now and just open it up for everybody else on this phone call to pose any questions to Dr. Patel at this point.
I had a question actually, as it applies to mentorship. You know, I think mentorship's important in any stage in anything that we do, but it seems to me, especially in medical device development, you would need to identify a mentor that has some of these connections with industry, that has connections with BME, for example. What advice do you have as far as identifying a mentor? If you have an idea for maybe an instrument, identifying a mentor that you think can help you get from A to B.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, and it's Kevin, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Kevin. Believe it or not, just because, you know, they're a little bit few and far between, to be honest, Kevin. You know, there are a lot of us that have great ideas, and very few that have taken the idea and take it to the next step. So I think it does require a little bit of hunting, you know, and so probably your mentor may not be in your division, may not even be in your department, but it translates quite well, you know, because this is a different beast. You know, the process is much different than practicing pancreatology. So I think, you know, starting with your innovations office and technology program is a good place to start, because once you express an interest, they will probably have workshops, or they will have sort of a built-in mentorship program for those people who are interested in this process. And they may hook you up with a nephrologist, you know, or a cardiologist, who they may connect you with a biomedical engineer, you know, for that matter, who has been through the process a few times. So they don't necessarily have to share your interest in pancreas. They just need to know the process, and you can teach them the pancreas part. Is that fair to say, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. You know, all my background before I started working with Dr. Patel was actually in cardiac surgery. So that's where I learned the very first steps of this process. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. And as you mentioned, I think learning the process, as you mentioned, can be translatable between fields. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, Kevin, that was probably the most intimidating part for me, you know, and I you know, after 4 or 5 years, I knew the clinical practice inside out. You know, I mean, that part wasn't the difficult part, or coming up with ideas of where I thought improvements needed to be made was not the difficult part. And I would just share that with industry, because they had the means, and it was very easy for me to just share with them, until I realized that, you know what, it'd be even better or more fun if I did it myself. But I had no idea how to go about doing it. And by no means am I a master at it, even to this day. I mean, Chris and I are learning on a regular basis what this process is, but we've met a lot of neat people along the way. And most of these people are really happy to share their experiences, their resources, their networking. Really surprised, you know, as to, especially from an institutional standpoint, and even within our city, you know, going out and going to a quarterly citywide meeting of innovation folks. And again, it's cross-discipline, but you'll really meet some, you know, you meet CEOs of companies that have started companies based on ideas. You'll meet business people, you'll meet engineers, you'll meet physicians, and you sort of just pick up things, you know, that way, sort of ad hoc. I wish that, you know, I wish there was sort of a 101 that sort of walks you through the process. And so, you know, some institutions are trying to make that effort to at least giving you a basic introduction, oversight, overview of the process. But essentially it's really going out there and digging and getting to know people and networking and getting pieces from here and there. And I think the fact that this is rather difficult is why so few of us do it, you know, honestly. You know, there, you know, of the, you know, 30 attendings that you have in your GI division, to really ask how many of you have taken a great idea and commercialized it. You know, that's going to be a really small number, because it's not that we don't have all great ideas. I mean, we have ideas on a daily basis, most of us. It's just a matter of the process is so intimidating and time consuming, and most of us don't take the necessary steps to learn it. But you have to be pretty ambitious and pretty dedicated to sort of cut through all the, you know, the horse shit to get to where you want to get. But just the fact that we're having this conversation tonight tells me, you know, you guys are definitely interested in it. You just need some guidance in where to seek it out. But it's very gratifying to do.
Anticipating he'll probably need more than 4, but I'll see how much. Yeah, I'm just, you might want to go with your battle.
I think that's Adrian
Okay.
taking care of patients in the ICU.
Okay, I thought, okay. Okay.
Dr. Patel, I have a question.
Yes, Samir.
Yes. When we do research or like clinical research, when we come up with an idea, the way that we can test that whether it's a good idea or not is just to go to PubMed, search the similar article and see what's going on. Right. How about medical devices? When we come up with like few ideas, how can we test or think then which one is better, which one worth spending time and going after mentors?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you, it's an area you've got, you know, you've got to balance a little bit of, you know, you've got to balance a little bit of security along with, you've got to sort of, you've got to test it out and vent it out to a few people to get some feedback on whether you're on the right track, right? So, you know, I'm going to let Chris tackle it. I'm curious to see what.
Oh boy, it's a quiz.
He does this a lot. So, Chris, what do you think?
Me on the spot here.
Yeah.
So gap analysis.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's gap analysis, right? I mean, you're just looking at the market, what's out there currently. You don't know what people are working on. There's no way for any of us to know that. You know, you can go and look at who's filed for what patents within the past couple of years, and you can sort of get an idea, but just because it's on the books doesn't mean someone will ever pursue it. You know, one of my favorite examples is there's this stent that's patented as a self-clearing biliary stent. So if you guys have ever seen this thing, it's a biliary stent and it has a ball in the middle, and it's got a couple of little crosshatch sections on the ends to keep the ball in. And what's supposed to happen is that as the patient walks and moves and lays down and sits and all this other stuff, the ball is supposed to move and clear the stent. Well, if you have any knowledge of biofilms and, you know, anything related to proteases and proteins in general, you know, it won't take long for that to get clogged up. But nonetheless, somebody has a patent on it. So I think that's where you have to watch, because even if somebody doesn't, sometimes, you know, what we've found in our experience, and Dr. Patel has more experience in this area for sure than I do, but is you have companies who will go out there and they'll get an idea from a physician, and then they'll go out and patent it just because they think it's a good idea, because it doesn't take them, you know, but a few $1,000s to go out and get the patent. They don't have to bring it to market. They just have to get the patent. And then once they have the patent, it's protected. So if you have an idea, you don't, you know, maybe you accidentally miss that patent in your research, and then you file and you start working on your own prototype, eventually somebody's going to pick up on it, and they're going to say, well, you know, you start making money, they're going to come after you and say, you know, you need to pay us. Most famous case of this was pulse oximetry. So not to go off on a tangent, but if you guys look it up, it was Nellcor and Massimo, and there was a big stink there about the patent, but it was a lot of money that was settled outside of court. And then the second most famous case in engineering was razor companies, one who had 4 blades and I think one who had 5. And again, it was the same situation where the company's patent was what was referred back to, and the court sided with the first company and said, your patent covers the extra blade. So I think it was Schick and Bick or something. One had to pay the other a lot of money. So gap analysis, yeah, you look at what's out there, you look at the patents. It's just as important to look at the products that are on the market as it is to look at the products that are in patent. And then what I like to do, and we have fun with this, is you draw a graph, right? So an XY graph, and on one axis you have your market, on the other axis you have your spectrum of products, and it's usually high value or low value to high value, and then low impact to high impact. And then you start drawing little bubbles for what's out there. So company X will have, a market value, high value, but maybe it's a low impact product, and another company might have a high impact, but it's a low market share, low value. And you can graphically represent this. And then when you have it on a graph, you can kind of see, okay, where the gaps are. And that's what you target at. And this is a business thing. So it's a little bit of a weird concept to us as engineers. And I'm sure to medical people, it may be a little more familiar. I don't know, but that's kind of gap analysis, I think, is really
more bizarre. Yeah. We don't necessarily think of that, but I agree. I mean, Amir, I think, the base of your question, from what I can gather, is, you think you've got a good idea and you want to sort of solidify that you're on the right track, right? And I think this is where your mentor or mentors come into play. Somebody that you can sort of vent the idea to. I vent ideas to Chris. Chris vents ideas to me. I share ideas with my colleagues, and sort of our circle of trust, so to speak. You create your circle of trust, and you say, okay, we're talking about things almost on a daily basis, Chris, right? I mean, things that pop up. You want to have people you can share things with that you don't have to worry about, and that you respect their opinion enough, or they have a mastery in that particular area that you're talking about. And it'll save you a lot of grief and heartache down the road to say, okay, this is an idea. What do you think about it? And he'll say, no, it's already been done, or no, there's already something out there, or somebody's already written about this. And you guys do that on the clinical research side all the time, right? You do your PubMed research, as you said, or you ask your mentors. But from a medical device, so if you're thinking about something that to put through spyglass, you had on cholangioscopy, you run it by your attending who does a ton of cholangioscopy and say, hey, I've got this idea. Is this a pertinent problem for you? Does this have some teeth? And most people are going to be open enough, if you've got a relationship with them, to share that with you and say, Amir, this is a great idea, and I'll tell you why it's a great idea, and I think you should pursue this, or the vice versa. So I think that's a fair enough place to start. You guys are in great situations right now where people, in general want to help you, because you're just at that stage of your careers. And there's sort of an altruistic, naive component. You're not out there in the shark I don't want to make it sound like there's just a bunch of piranhas out there. But I think honestly, the people that you have to worry about are really with industry. You'll be surprised that their ears are always on, because you are a commodity. They don't have the clinical parts. You have the clinical parts. You have the ideas. They know how to make things happen, which is the part that we miss, right? So you want to, you can share that with other clinicians and probably be pretty safe, because they're not going to take those steps to, you can feel pretty safe in that, especially if it's people that you trust and care about you. So that's the first place to vent. And then once you sort of have vented the idea and you're onto something, then you do exactly what Chris said. You do your gap analysis and you say, what's out there? Who's filed a patent? Okay, nobody's filed a patent on what I'm thinking about. Great. Okay, next step, do a gap analysis and say, all right, where does this fit into the scheme of what's already out there? And is this completely novel? And it's a good exercise to do on a regular basis, and you kind of get better at it the more you do it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Sure, no problem. I knew there was going to be a quiz in here somewhere.
Yeah, I figured you'd be conducting the whole thing, honestly, Chris. So,
No.
yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions? I think we've got about 5 minutes left for Dr. Patel. So.
I think my parting words would be, just if this is something you really like to do, surround yourself with like-minded folks. I mean, things for me were fairly stagnant, honestly, until I met Chris. And so I met Chris, my biomedic, with his background, my background. I think we made a wonderful team, and we've sort of learned the process together. Our skill sets complement one another. We're motivated to do the same thing, and you need help in this. You can't do it by yourself, and so seek out your resources that you have, and at kind of an early stage, the sooner the better. Honestly, if you learn these things kind of at an early stage, again, it might save you some heartache down the road. All right, guys. Well, I wish you the best with your careers, and if you're at DDW or pull me aside. Love to get to meet you guys in person. And unfortunately, I won't be at Pancreas Fest this year, but I'm sure I'll be there in the years to come. So wish you the best. You guys have my email. If questions pop up at any point, feel free to just shoot me a line.